This is Sam from Sam Goodwill. You're listening to Nursery, a podcast.
Podcast from Ohio's creative voice.
A podcast from Ohio's creative voice.
I notice things and they make me laugh, and then I usually store them in the back of my head somewhere, and then they end up on the stage.
I think that there was a point in time where rap was pretty much non-existent in Ohio.
I actually grew up listening to pop music.
It's the coolest thing in the entire universe.
I love Ohio. I miss it.
Stomach started growling, and he started slowing the way he was walking and taking smaller strides, and you could tell something was definitely not right.
All my stuff has literary elements to it.
We've gotten to such a phase where people can just say they're an artist.
Wading through a sea of drunks, trying to do the best he can for the band.
Being in a room full of all your best friends, even if you don't know anybody, because you can sing and dance together and just have a really good time.
If you don't know, you don't need to know, man.
Would you like to do a podcast?
Lake Erie or the Cuyahoga River.
You're always going to make it into something, don't you? Can't just hang out.
People complain that there's nothing to do here, but there is. You just have to go look for it.
A special edition of a Nursery podcast, which means it's not really any different than any other podcast you've heard. I don't know why it's special. But the theme today is going to be a more in-depth discussion of third class and what third class is all about and what music means to these fellow chaps here, Lee, Peppy, Jack, the members of third class. You've heard them on Nursery podcast in various formats. And we're going to continue that discussion of things they've already kind of talked about in one form or another. Third class has come up quite a bit in the podcast, but we're going to use this as a way to go a little more in-depth in terms of everything you would think about a band, maybe. Song creation, themes they try to cover, the origins of music in terms of their own personal history with music and how that maybe affected how they've come up with things that have become part of third class. So to start with, the first kind of theme or idea I had in my head was I was curious about what, with each of you individually, I'll ask you firstly, thinking about music in general and how you approach music in life, or what music was to you in terms of what you listened to, or what you maybe what your parents listened to when you were a little kid, before you met Peppy.
Okay. Junior Walker and the All-Stars, Hall & Oates, Mary Chapin Carpenter, for some reason, and AC/DC were in heavy rotation at my house in the late 80s. And so
this was stuff that your parents were playing a lot.
Not my choice. And so I think even though it doesn't show very well in our music until maybe in 2014, we've had an influence from classic R&B and things like that, and from country. Like Mary Chapin Carpenter is a country artist, and Junior Walker and the All-Stars and Hall & Oates are the R&B side of it. And I think those have always laid dormant, and we finally figured a way how to grapple with those genres without making them too stupid like a lot of country is, or too kind of like we're too white to get R&B correct either. So we kind of find the middle of the road on both those genres. So that's what music meant to me back when.
When you think about those like the artists you just brought up now, do you think of them like fondly with an element of nostalgia, or is it more like, oh, I had to listen to that back then, I didn't really have a choice, that's what my mom played?
Well, usually very fondly, like even with AC/DC, who is like an afterthought, who I just mentioned, because it's not like I'm some big AC/DC fan, but they have such a two-dimensional papery grit sound to them, and they're like Jailbreak 76 was the album we heard all the time, and that really made its way into our influence. And I'm nostalgic with all those artists, but song by song. You'll notice that every artist I named doesn't have one full good album. Like, I think a lot of people could probably agree on that with AC/DC. They all just have really amazing songs throughout their careers, kind of like the Rolling Stones.
Right.
Where like the artists themselves have no solid ground to stand on as far as one brilliant album. They just wrote a lot of really good songs over a lot of years.
What about you, Peppy?
Well, I was actually a really emotional kid, even though I am a robot now. So the things I kind of like think about a lot as far as like getting to know music as a child was I have a lot of memories of my mom and my aunt like dancing a lot, and we listened to a lot of
like what kind of
they
music?
listened to a lot of Dolly Parton and Johnny Cash and stuff like that. So I guess again kind of going along with what Lee said, a lot of country.
So you have a lot of it. So a lot of that early music is kind of tied in with like the imagery of them dancing. Is that a big?
Yeah, kind of.
Were you dancing with them, or were you just kind of off?
No, I was always kind of off to the side, and like they did that thing that like moms and aunts do to children that are just like sitting on a couch. They try to like make you dance with them, or they sing at you, and it's just
awful.
like, it's like the worst thing ever. But I remember like really, because they were always singing along to like these sappy Dolly Parton songs or something like that, or Johnny Cash songs. Like I really noticed a lot of the lyrics because of that otherwise like kids just kind of listen to a melody or dance around. But I feel like I got a lot of emotion from a lot of the lyrics.
Right. Do you see elements of that and of those memories in like third class now?
A little bit. The way I approach listening to music is completely different.
Like how so?
Just because it changes once you start playing music, and I never, until I was, 12 years old or whatever, when I became friends with Lee and he kind of forced me into doing music with him. I kind of never thought I was... I don't know if it was that I never wanted to or had any interest. It was that I never thought I had the ability to do that, and he he was just kind of like, no, you can do it, we're doing it. And I was like, okay, I mean, that's awesome, I want to do this. And now that I feel like I can call myself a musician, I definitely just listen to music in a different way. You kind of have a different, I guess you'd say, relationship with music, but also that sounds pretty sappy.
It does, but I mean, that's probably the best way to describe it, though. It is a relationship of sorts.
Yeah. Now that I'm saying it, it sounds pretty pretentious to be like, well, I'm a musician, so I know music differently than other people, and maybe that's true, maybe it's not.
That's true. I mean,
it's probably not
in
true,
the sense to a certain degree, that is true. I mean,
maybe
maybe the best way to phrase it isn't so much that you appreciate it more or better.
Right, that's a good way to put it.
More superior fashion. It's more just differently. It's going to be a different perspective if you play it versus just solely listening to music.
Right. But I still feel like there are some I feel like there are a lot of musicians, because they're very trained, they listen to music and they only appreciate things that are impressive technically. And I've never gotten to that point. And maybe it's because I'm not very trained in the technical sense.
Do you mean in the sense that you're not concerned as much with
something
doing that in the own
yeah.
creation of your music? That's not a
with my
big
music
element?
and just listening to music in general. I'm not necessarily impressed by something that's technically impressive, but I guess it still goes back to like if the emotion is there,
right?
That's more impressive than somebody like playing a really
the emotional
solo.
component is supersedes any of the
so I guess I'm not a
technical
robot.
aspect. No, not at all.
Oh my god, I'm crying. No, I'm just kidding. I am a robot.
Why are you crying oil?
Oh god.
Weird. We're gonna move over to
My
Jack
battery.
now. So I don't know if you kind of joined us late, but I was asking these two about their perspective of what they remember from music in their early childhood, like before third class ever existed. Like what are some of the bands or artists that come to mind?
I remember listening to the AC/DC nonstop though, like the same cassette over and over again. But I did that with Hall & Oates too.
Do you see stuff from? Do you think about those bands right now, and the music in general? Do you see any elements of that you were in third class now?
Definitely with Hall & Oates, I think that probably our songs are the same chord progressions as their songs. They're in the same keys. Like all of our songs are like C and F, and so are theirs.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're just old like rock progressions, and I think that we pretty much wrote all of the same songs that just sound differently because we're not, two guys in the '80s. We're Hall & Oates, but we're like us.
Right.
And sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to add that I think the AC/DC thing was like this very one singular AC/DC album that got played a ton, and Hall & Oates was more across the like greatest hits spectrum. So that was kind of an interesting vibe too, I think. And I wanted to say we got our like basically fourth member here, Steve Boyle, our youngest brother. So feel free to chime in with anything since you're hanging out too.
Did you mention Junior Walker?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, Junior Walker. Yeah,
that's all I think. I thought of.
Though, like, I didn't think to mention that, like, we did pull stuff out of, like, my mom's CD collection and stuff. And so she had, like, all of the Beatles albums, and I listened to, like, Sgt. Pepper's 100 times. And, like, she had a bunch of Grateful Dead, and I used to listen to that.
Was that early on in childhood? Yeah. Even, like, how old do you think?
I mean, the same period of time when we first started buying cassettes and CDs and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
It was like really like, oh, Mom has CDs? Oh, I guess I can listen to Sgt. Pepper's. Like
10 Abbey Road years old or so was when we maybe took it in our own hands or so. Right?
Yeah. And my first CD was White Town. Your Woman. Was the album called Your Woman?
Women in Technology.
Women in Technology.
That was huge for Penn.
I don't even really know that one.
You played that all the time, right?
Yeah, I became obsessed with that album, but really it was because of Jack. Because I was, I knew that song, and Jack happened to have the album, and I like heard him playing a couple songs, and I was like, "That's good. Give me that album."
Jack has completely turned us on to like 80% of what we like started liking in music. Like he got me into Weezer, he got me into the Presidents, he got me into Rage Against the Machine even. He got me into all those 90s bands you name off when you grew up in our era and you're white and you listen to like silly punk rock stuff and angry music and stuff.
Was it just because were you just listening to a wider range of music than
I just generally have better taste than him now that now that we're adults. Like he been listening to like Blake Shelton and stuff. Did he tell you this?
Easton Corbin.
Oh well.
So
there's a significant difference there. I don't know what it is yet, but it's
Easton Corbin.
But I mean, as a little kid, were you just listening to a bigger volume of stuff than Lee?
I don't know why he did. But
he must have gotten cassettes at the same time, right?
Right. But
what cassettes did you buy instead? You had like Dookie or something.
My first full-length album was Fantasy by Mariah Carey, and my first single was
wait, say that again.
My first CD was Fantasy by Mariah Carey. That had like a bunch of hits on it, and then my first single was a CD of Green Day doing Basket Case, you know.
Okay.
So that was kind of a big pinnacle of
I think it's possible that
pop rock.
No, I think
Fantasy is a great first album.
Sure,
not bad
but Jack
taste.
was such a tastemaker in that he got us into what the staying power bands like.
Yeah, I think it's actually the opposite. I think that we listened to a broader range, and I was just more discerning. So that I would like the stuff that I did choose would stick. Like we still liked the Presidents, but like but we're not like
latest album isn't on our repertoire. Like what Presidents is, so it's interesting.
It's not so much that you start disliking those bands, it's just you expand your music universe in a way.
Right. Lee had tons of stuff that like we'll never listen to again. Like he had like Stone Temple Pilots albums and stuff.
You wouldn't listen to those again?
Nope.
You went back?
I did when Scott Weiland died, and kind of took a little journey back for a nostalgic purpose, but for purposes of just good music, they're like the bands I mentioned, where they're like Hall & Oates, kind of where there may not be one amazing album. There's just more like a lot of good songs in their career. Maybe not even really for Stone Temple Pilots. There's like 4 good songs in their career.
So I was just going to ask you, Steve, you hear them mentioning the different music that they remember in their childhood before the third class days.
Right.
Is that a lot, because you're a bit younger, is that a lot of that the same for you, or are they a lot different? Do you remember a lot of different artists or types of music?
It's very similar. I think that they named all of the essentials because of they're the ones that introduced me to music,
right?
And then on top of that, like being homeschooled, I was even that much more just like they were like my only outlet, really. And so if anything, I think it's interesting thinking of all these combinations and then thinking with their style and genre of music, it almost doesn't add up, but then when we address what everyone listens to now, it starts to make more sense, I'm like, especially with this new album, I'm like, all right, Lee's doing like a Mountain Goats thing finally, instead of like listening to LL Cool J and then coming up with third class experimental stuff, I'm thinking, but anyways, Hall & Oates is like my first musical memory, I think, and then Presidents, and of course all the 90s rock stuff. But I think they named all the right ones.
So just moving ahead a little bit and thinking about like the early infancy of third class, or when you guys first maybe started to get interested in actually playing instruments versus just listening to music. Like when you think, I mean, I know you've talked before, even on some other podcasts, about the beginnings of how third class started, like the different people that were involved and all that. But I'm thinking more in terms of, I'm thinking let's say back to when you and Peppy first met each other. How long was it? Because that would have been like 7th grade that you guys met each other.
Right.
How long was it before you started to develop the idea or think about messing around on instruments or even coming up with a song? Like, what are your memories of that?
Well,
hi, Alan.
Well, my memories are it went hand in hand with film. The reason I met Peppy was because of film. We tried to make like student videos for our classes, and that's where then our comedy troupe with you, Craig, Bullskit Productions, comes from, obviously, just for listeners who are following. But otherwise, when Peppy and I wanted to make music, like Peppy said, I didn't give it a second thought. I just was like, we can do this, and it was partially because we made movies. So I was like, oh, we made these dumb little class project movies, we can definitely play music. The blind confidence that Peppy described. So it went from listening to playing, in that we used to sing over other people's beats and rap over demos before we ever really totally understood how to play an instrument.
So the videos you were making, like those early videos you're just talking about, were all music based in a sense?
Mostly, I mean, not always, but close enough that like we didn't see a difference between the two worlds. Maybe amateur film making and amateur music making had the exact same backyard to us without us ever having to explain it that way. And so him and I started rapping because, again, stuff that didn't become a mainstay because it wasn't Jack's taste making, it was mine. We'd rap over Beastie Boys, Mace, Puff Daddy, stuff that we don't really listen to that much now.
It was kind of like a lot of people, they do their research and try to like know exactly what they're going to do before they try to do something, and we just took the approach of like, we're going to do this before we know how to and figure it out as we go along. So we were like, we are musicians before we knew how to play anything, and we started to try to do music the only way we knew how to, which was not
was
really
there any was there any rhyme or reason in the way that you because you got to think at some point you don't have any instruments at all, right? Was it
maybe a guitar that was broken?
I remember our first couple songs we recorded, we wrote like during science class, and it was just kind of like little melodies we made up, and we were like, let's go lay these tracks down, and then we would go like record on a tape recorder and beat on like a Lego box or something.
Yeah, one year for Christmas we got like 2 of those guitars that have little speakers built into them that run on like 9 volt
I remember those.
And like we might have gotten a keyboard that year too. I had gotten a drum set when I was like 8, and like we always had a little Casio keyboard and stuff like that. So it's and our mom had a piano, so like it seemed like there was always something that we could use. We had a Casio forever. Me and Lee did stupid little songs like our whole lives on that thing.
I was gonna say, I remember there always, even before the third class days, always being a piano or keyboard of some sort. So I wondered if that was kind of the
I answered you
first instrument that maybe you had at your fingertips.
That's right. I answered you as if we never touched music before film, and that's not true. It was just a decision to start an actual band that I was kind of answering to, but that's correct. We always had some little demo keyboard, like a lot of kids would have, like some little bell instrument or something to screw with, and it just like lit up for us more than the average kid for some reason. Yeah.
Was everyone in those at the beginning like that equally comfortable on messing around on the piano, or did one of you tend to do it more than the others?
Peppy and Jack were better pianists than I was when we started, no doubt, and they still kind of technically are, because I don't use my pinky very often. It's kind of like annoying. I think it annoys a lot of musicians when I play the way I play, even now. But I think the reason stuff switched was because of attitude. Like I have a frontman attitude compared to these guys, and so again, they're just like Peppy kind of. There just wasn't planning. It wasn't like like we just wrote lyrics and we were like, let's record these lyrics now without thinking about where the tune was going to come from. So, so I'm not the best man for the job, and I'm the front man. And like Jack and Pep might not be the best man for the job as far as. Like, I make them now be the highlight people, the percussionist people, the harmony people. And I don't know where we organically would have fit, but we just were like, I like this, I'm going to do this.
How do you think how was it, do you think that you evolved as you just phrased it, the front man of the band? Were you
I think in the group of
just default
us,
he's the most controlling out of
controlling.
And I think it is organic though, because I think the problem with a lot of people is like they're like, this guy is like really outgoing and charismatic, he's definitely our lead singer, but that doesn't mean he's the best man for the job. It's just like, because we didn't plan anything and it just happened this way, I think it is more organic.
Sure, and in this group of people, I'm considered like kind of more outgoing or like aggressive, but I like to say that out in the real world I might not be so much, but we kind of grew up in the not to use this word mean, but like in a little bit of a slight outcast type situation. I don't think anyone thought we were idiots or thought we were total dorks or hated us. I don't mean it like that.
Right.
But I think all of us in Bull Skit or third class or whatever you want to say, or Steve with his rap stuff, Summer Camp Steve, are all introverts just kind of like gritting their teeth and trying as hard as they can to publicly entertain people, like maybe in a therapeutic way.
Right. I was going to go back to something that Peppy said earlier. You said something along the lines of, well, I started playing music we started getting into music or playing music because Lee kind of told me to. Was there moments where you had to get over feeling uncomfortable about like being creative in that way? Because in some ways, especially back then, as I remember, you were in some ways very reserved and even more quiet than you are now.
Yeah, in
was
some
that
ways,
difficult
for sure.
in some ways?
It was difficult when we.
Maybe if you think in terms of having to go out in public and play at a later point when you guys were well enough developed to do that.
That was definitely difficult. I was really, when Lee suggested music, I was right away really excited about it for sure. And I think the excitement of just the thought of being like part of something like that, I was kind of a loser as a kid, so I was never invited to be part of something like that. So I was like, heck yeah, I'm in a band.
Right.
And so I think the excitement gave me the the fire to actually like go through with it and be more creative and outgoing. But yeah, it was definitely at first a forced thing because it was unnatural for me to have friends in general, let alone like friends who.
You might be a little hard on yourself right now, but I think we know what you're saying, right? Yeah. So when you think about when third class quote unquote started, and you guys started to actually create specific songs with your specific set instruments that you pretty much have to this day since the beginning. Of course, I'm sure you guys will represent or talk about the guitars with missing strings or whatever that you still use to this day.
We
and
talk,
of course, as part
we
of
talk
your.
a lot about that now, but we didn't think about it back then. Like,
right, I was just gonna say that
we were just playing songs on 2-string guitars. Like we didn't think anything of it. We were like, this is what we have, so this is what we're using, and this is totally normal.
Right.
But I do remember like the first time we got a couple of songs together, like all three of us, and how like it sounded like a full band for the first time in like our first like couple years of just rapping over demos. I remember the feeling of like how
what songs
exciting
come
it was.
to mind? Like when you're just saying that, what old songs come to mind when you
I'll just like name off a couple songs, and these might not even like be the earliest songs that were actually like the start of them, but I remember a song called I'm a Poison. I don't know, Volunteer. These songs that are like kind of they were like pretty punky. We always ended up playing everything too fast when we played live, which we did for years and years, and still do sometimes.
Do you guys have a song in particular that stands out as something really, really early that you did?
Ton of Bricks. I think that was like the first song I tried to play bass to when I got the bass.
Yeah, Ton of Bricks holds. Listeners can't really find that anywhere, but it does. That is the beginning of like stuff like Flight of Owls, which is just real abrupt punk, which we don't do all the time, but you hear it in all our, like, to name some current tracks, Famous in Our Minds, Flight of Owls, I Love This. Those ones from the last 10 years or so, those have this weird abruptness that the track Jack's describing have, where play one thing over the other that you think doesn't fit, but really ends up working well,
How many albums did you guys have in those early days before you, let's say, started to do the more professionally recorded albums?
About 3 or 4.
Do you remember their names?
Yeah, we had one called Pants with Little Legs that we recorded twice. One called My Brain Has Grown a Beak was the second one. Third one was called It'd Be a Pretty Boring Place. The fourth one was called A Day for Gliding in the Sky. And so what we did was, once we went into the studio and did an album called Close Epitaphis Clo that came out in 2006, a wide release in 2007, we chose our favorites from those 4 albums to carry on into our what was a rebooted career, which we didn't want to negate the other albums, to be clear, but just to record them a little bit more properly. They were I Love This. There was one called Blue. There's Explode the Sky. That was originally on Pants with Little Legs. Painting a Picture Over and Over was on Brandon Is Gonna Be, and all this. We chose one from every album, kind of our favorites. I Love This was one.
Was that how did you come to the decision to pick those songs?
Not very professionally at all. We just went into the studio and we're like, want to try this one now? And we did it, and those were the ones that
you just went by what you guys thought sounded good?
Barely even that.
Just whatever songs we were kind of into that day.
Yeah.
That's kind of, do you think about it now? That's kind of weird.
It is.
I think nowadays, for where you guys are at, maybe just in the difference in age or something, I think you guys would labor over that a lot more.
Oh, definitely. We did, immediately with the follow-up, The Red Wheelbarrow, we did labor over it. Although we did write one of the songs the day before we went into the studio, which was called Flight of Owls.
Right.
And that's the album that the Nursery song is on. That's the theme for this podcast. And so we started that song as an example. We started writing more about more meaningful, ballad-driven stuff that had more. I felt like Chloe was more chaos and stuff so we definitely thought more about it after that.
Just going back a little bit, thinking about the transition between those earlier, less produced albums going into the more professionally produced ones, or official ones now in the canon. Was there some big leap or musical change you made during that time because you were able to get a more professional sound? Did that have an effect on the kind of music you guys decided to make at all?
No, I don't think so. I do think it had an effect on our execution. I think we went into the studio our first time at Amprion Recorder 2006 very well rehearsed, ridiculously well rehearsed, and we'd messed up on one song and that one didn't make the cut. And so
what song was that?
That was called My Journey to Reality. And it's good it didn't make the cut. It wasn't finished. And so I believe that Close Epitaphis Clo, our first official album, is the tightest album we will ever record, because we were just so into it and had the hardest songs we've ever written in our quote career on that album. And ever since then we've been sloping more into stuff that matters more as far as lyrics, chords, less rhythmically oriented. Whereas that album was, you had to be rehearsed to get it right.
Right. So when you think about, ask all of you briefly, when you think about that first, professionally made album, 10 years ago now, it's crazy how long that is when I think about it. But when you think about that album and the various songs on there, and there's enough time passed, I think this isn't such a weird question, but is there some sort of theme to it now that you maybe weren't necessarily aware of when you were making it, but when you look back, it's like, oh, this album was, really about this or about that.
I'll let these guys answer. I'll just give you a real short one and say we did know we wanted it to be vaguely childhood themed.
And it still feels that way to you now.
Sure, with another layer that we were like kids now in my mind when we recorded it. So, but go ahead.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, it was chaos.
But is that straight? Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't like there's any more meaning than what I said, if any different
right.
than that, right?
Right.
Yeah, I agree. It was kind of thrown together chaos, which was kind of, looking back on it, I think it worked, and I'm glad we did it that way.
Here's a terrible question that you should never ask a musician about their album, but I'm going to ask it anyways, because just curious to see what you say. But if you had to pick one song from that album, you had to discard the rest of them. This is the only song that you could ever play or listen to again. What would the song be?
Drug Inside Your Wrist Part 1.
Say that again.
Drug Inside Your Wrist Part 1.
Okay.
I Love This.
Okay.
Victory of the Severed, I guess.
Did you guys all pick different songs just to be different?
No, I think we really.
You better not have. You should have answered this question honestly. And
it's been a lot of time, and that album, there are certain moments on it that we probably feel slightly sheepish about now, and so we definitely have slight disagreements about the album, and that's why we ended up not doing. For a while we advertised a 10-year reunion show of the album celebrating, and we canceled that show partially on.
Really, I don't remember this.
Yeah, well, it wasn't like we advertised it big or anything, but we had it booked, and we kind of had a little flyer going for it. And
why did you cancel?
Well, partially availability. All of us are doing things like Pepe's starting the Orange Avocado, and I'm working there with him, and Jack is working at various camps and stuff, and has not a side project, a whole other band called Juche that he does. So we got together and rehearsed the album once through about, and we were like, I'm not going to speak for you because I know there's songs you don't like on the album, I'm sure, but I was like, I still adore this album, but it doesn't feel totally right to play all these songs anymore, I hate being.
What do you mean in the sense right?
I don't know. Like, there's a song called Get Out of My Head that's real loud and screamy, the Pepe screams, and.
You mean it's too thematically different from what your latest music is?
No, it's just too angry and 20-year-old-y. And we're 30.
Okay.
And we're 30.
So in other words,
you're
at a different point in your life where it doesn't seem quite as authentic.
It sounds so precious to say it that way, but we had a really hard time at the rehearsal because some of those songs shouldn't be played live. They just shouldn't be played live very often. Most of them are fine, but there was a few that.
You mean
were
they don't sound the quality of them live isn't good?
Right. I don't know.
Did you really feel that back in the day when you first made the album?
No way. We were angry enough that those songs worked live, but now trying to scream and be angry we're not quite as angry.
Right.
So it was just real hard. It's not like they sounded terrible. It just felt very counterintuitive.
Uncle Bob, how are you? Good.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey.
Beautiful day.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Did you already eat your waffle?
No, we're gonna come in a second.
Okay. We'll
it'll be good.
Yeah.
Definitely, man.
Good to see you.
Good to see you, man.
Hey.
Hey, man.
Actually, I should get a picture of you guys. Do you mind?
Yeah, go ahead. He just took a ton of them, so.
Okay.
Go for it, yeah.
Do you want? So I don't even know how long this is.
No, go
already.
ahead. Ask like one, two more. This is getting good. It's good that you focus on the beginning.
I got a tiny little thing, if that's cool.
Yes, do it.
Something I just thought of, and I don't know how much you're gonna be editing, but when you were talking earlier, Lee mentioned about being more aggressive and stuff like that, and I like that you pointed out where it came from and where that's encouraged. But aggressive, it's definitely a good term, but it's also in comparison to the rest of us. So all this stuff that Lee does that's not even involved with the music, it has to do with your courage and determination and stuff, whether it's collecting the money at the end of the show, which so many times we've all been in the situations where we're like, dude, I'm so tired, I don't even care, and he's like, no, we should, and it's always this the right answer that he's willing to go the extra mile, whether it's encouraging people or following through, scheduling shows instead of just talking about it, and then what Pepe mentioned too about not thinking too much about the instruments being in the shape that they were, and and opposed to being oh yeah, this will be our thing, we only have 2 strings. It's no, hey, let's do what we can with what we have, and so I like the idea of really focusing on how much Lee has done with just making things happen. Right, we said aggressive, but I like motivated and determined.
Yeah,
and
I think that's a good word.
Right, and it even cross-references with skits. It even cross-references with skits. There's been so many times where, I don't know, I get in a weird mood and I'm just yeah, that, I don't know, man, like, maybe that idea. And he's like, no, let's just follow through with it and we'll decide on it later. And then, and it ends up being this awesome skit. And, like, I was just being too concerned about, like, what people were going to think or something silly, you know, and, like, so I've always, like, admired that determination and just, like, comfort in your own skin. And so I just want to, like, sugarcoat the, like, it's like, yeah, aggressive, but in a bold, like, determined way, you know. Yeah. And I think that that's a really important factor to have. Like you said, you might not be right for the position, but out of all of us, you're the only one with the potential.
Well, thanks.
And that's a very necessary and key ingredient to even keeping something like this going for so long.
Dude, none of us would be, like, recording anything if it wasn't for Lee. Maybe we would be, like, writing songs, but they'd only be in our heads. You know.
Well, thanks for saying that, man. Because I think one thing that people overlook when they're in small time situations, like all of us are, whether it's with Steve's rap stuff, Summer Camp Steve, or his earlier stuff, or Bull Skid, or any of this stuff, or Juche, is that you kind of forget that all your heroes also made a lot of mistakes. Like, you forget, you think that somehow you're not legitimized, but even if you name someone who you think is just at the height of the most talented acting or music career, and you still talk about them like you still can say, oh, that album was a total washout, who cares about it? Or you can, oh, that movie was a mistake, and you don't think they're any less real. So why would you think yourself was less real? So I appreciate Steve saying that, because, like, I think that's what kills dreams, is that you don't realize that your heroes are making the same mistakes you are.
True. Yeah, it's very true.
Yeah, like, because, I don't know, because their marketing hides it from you or something, you know? Like, you don't, but you have to live with it when you're the one making the mistakes. So it's interesting, yeah. But I'm glad, I'm glad you focused on the beginnings, because I think Jack and Peppy and Steve all kind of were these talents that I was managing, and so I think that, like, as the music went, if I was one that shaped it, it was because they had, like, the talent as far as, like, ideas. Jack actually knew what song. It sounds trendy now to say I listened to Weezer's Blue Album, but Jack just went and got it and loved it, you know. And
right.
Like him and Peppy had like this poetry that I was able to put in a little, you know, box of some sort, and try to recreate in other ways. And so it's interesting, because you have all these talented friends, you included, and our friends, all our Brandon, all these people, that you're like, these guys are so funny, and they just don't understand how funny they are, or these guys are so good, or they have this great idea for music, and they just don't see it, you know. And I think we still all struggle with that.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And good days.
Every leg of the centipede has to work in order for it to get places. At least the centipede were the legs.
So just to wrap,
they're all carrying me. Sorry.
So just to wrap up this conversation, so, you know, just spend a lot of time talking about the first album, but going through the 3 albums later after that, is that right? 3, and then the one that you're working on now. What's the biggest change? What's the biggest change? What's the biggest, besides, I don't want you to just say we're older now, because of course you're older from when you first made the first album. Yeah, 10 years ago when this podcast first started, 10 years ago. But what's the biggest change in terms of,
I think we're a lot less.
What the music is, if you have to describe the music simply, how's it different now than then?
We're a lot less obnoxious.
Okay.
Both, like, sonically and conceptually.
That's true.
What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with Jack completely, because we know when something doesn't need anything else added, and we are confident to stick with it. And that's, you know, we're working on an album entitled Virginia's Playlist right now, and the writing of Jack and Peppy is more prominent than ever, but the participation of them actually instrumentally in the song is minimized more than ever. And that's because we know together what works, what doesn't. Don't add it if it doesn't need it. Whereas when we started, we were chaos.
Like the first album, it's such
I think a car has gone past you every time you started to talk. But go ahead.
Yeah, this is, I think, our first album that is. Dang it.
It's okay. You can still hear you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
This is our first album that's like all about the editing, and before it was all about the writing. And I feel like this time we're just like we're editing like crazy. Like, you know, we'll write something minimal and edit that down, so it's like very minimal. Everything about it is just like. And what you're left with is, I think it's going to be the prettiest album we've made yet.
That sounds
excited
awesome.
about it.
Do you think there'll ever be some retro reversal another 10 years from now where you go back to being more obnoxious? And
we're going to be the most obnoxious we could possibly be.
I hope so.
We feel that we may.
That would be cool too.
We may make a punk EP to like level all this pretty love song stuff out.
Joking. I'm actually being serious.
Yeah, we'd really like to do that.
I was too. I'm seriously looking forward to it.
As obnoxious as our real life personalities.
Can we go get some waffles?
Yeah, so we're going to wrap up this special edition of a Nursery podcast. Yes, it was very long, but you found out a lot about third class today. And hopefully this encourages you to go to their website, thirdclass.net, check out some of the stuff we were talking about. New album coming out very soon, Virginia's Playlist. It's going to be good. It's going to be good. Yeah, that's about all I know how to plug. That's all I can do. But thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening, guys.
Happy waffle podcast. How long was that? I could sit there for like 3 hours.
Oh no.